The Midnight Shadow. Paranormal or just normal? My name is Akash. I'm 25 years old, and I've always considered myself a pretty rational person. I grew up in a small town with my mom and dad, who worked hard to give me a comfortable, middle-class upbringing. I was an only child and a bit of a loner in school. While I had a few close buddies to play video games with, I tended to keep to myself for the most part. But that all changed after I moved away from home and into my new apartment in Seattle a few months ago. I had just relocated to the city after college for my first real job and found a decent one-bedroom place downtown. It was an older building, but it had a lot of vintage charm. The area was also full of young people, bars, and stuff to do. A big change from my sleepy hometown. At first, everything seemed perfectly normal. During the day, the apartment was quiet except for the hustle and bustle outside. But almost as soon as night fell and I was alone, an eeriness seemed to take over the place. It started subtly at first, just some occasional creaking floors and flickering lights. Easy enough stuff to brush off in an old unit. But over time, strange events happening only after dark became more frequent and unnerving. I tell my new coworkers about the strange events over happy hour drinks after work. Dude, this all sounds crazy. You're sure you're not just imagining things? I swear, man, this place gets creepy at night. I keep hearing footsteps and voices when nobody is there. Raj seemed intrigued, always wanting me to keep him updated with the latest eerie occurrences. However, when I told my skeptical friends back home, they brushed it off. Really, Akash? Ghosts in your apartment? It's probably just an old building making noises. Yeah, don't let your mind play tricks on you. I bet you anything there is a normal explanation. If only it had been that simple. I decided I needed concrete proof, so I set up cameras around my apartment to try and capture evidence of the haunting. If I could just record the ghostly figures or voices, then I'd know for sure it was real. For several nights, I stayed up monitoring the footage, waiting anxiously. Then finally, I caught it. A shadowy form seeming to drift across the frame, lamps flickering wildly in the background. The apparition only appeared for a few eerie seconds, but it was enough. I couldn't wait to show my friends, feeling vindicated. But Rahul and Neha still thought it was just a glitch when I showed them the next day. I don't know, this could easily just be some kind of camera artifact. I still think you're jumping to conclusions. Yeah, lay off the paranormal podcasts, man. They're messing with your head. This isn't enough to prove a ghost. They warned me that investigating further might actually drive me insane, but I knew what I had seen with my own eyes. This was only the beginning. One night, everything came to a head. I was up late watching TV when suddenly all the power cut out, plunging me into darkness. The temperature dropped drastically. I grabbed my phone flashlight with shaking hands and carefully searched the apartment. In my bedroom, the closet door creaked open, and I saw it. A pale, ghostly figure drifting towards me. I stumbled back in shock, too terrified to even scream. The apparition continued floating closer, its empty eyes fixed on me. This was no trick of the light. An actual spirit was here and coming for me. In a panic, I raced out of the apartment and spent the night at a nearby hotel. I knew then I couldn't stay another night there. This place was clearly possessed by some evil entity. The next morning, I returned to gather my things, cautiously keeping an eye out for any paranormal activity. Luckily, the ghost seemed to only come out at night. As I packed, I racked my brain trying to figure out my next steps. Should I try to get my landlord to let me break the lease? Maybe bring in a psychic medium? But I knew I couldn't keep living there with that thing around. Exhausted and defeated, I took one last look around the apartment that had become my own personal haunting ground. I was finally ready to escape this nightmare for good. Little did I know, the true nature of the haunting was about to be revealed in daylight. Before leaving for good, I decided to review the footage one last time in the light of day for any clues I may have missed. As I rewatched the shadowy figure across the hallway, I noticed something that made my heart stop. The ghostly form moved in exactly the same way I do when sleepwalking at night. I continued studying the footage, now with fresh eyes. The banging noises sounded less sinister and more like someone stumbling into walls while unconscious. The lights flickering was probably just some shoddy electrical work. It finally dawned on me. All this time, I had been unknowingly sleepwalking at night and scaring myself without realizing it. The paranormal events were just normal occurrences that my overactive imagination had exaggerated in the dark. I even recognized the pale figure in my bedroom as my own reflection in the mirror. I simply hadn't noticed it at the time since I was still half asleep and so convinced I was being haunted. I laughed aloud at my foolishness. There was no ghost or demonic entity after all. It was just my mind playing tricks, fueled by one too many horror movies. In hindsight, the signs of my sleepwalking were obvious. I felt exhausted in the mornings, things were moving around, doors left open that I knew I shut, but fear had blinded me to the simple explanation. With reality setting back in, I decided to give the apartment another chance. I felt silly for letting my imagination run so wild and believing it was haunted. Turns out the only thing I needed to fear was my own overactive mind. In the end, I had a good laugh at myself for letting my imagination get so out of control. What I thought was a haunted apartment turned out to just be a series of normal events that I had wildly misinterpreted. I decided to continue living in the apartment after all. Now that I understood the cause of the disturbances, I no longer feared staying there. It felt silly to abandon a place simply because of my overactive mind. This experience taught me an important lesson: not to let fear and assumptions distort my perception, especially at night when the mind can play tricks. The human brain tries to find patterns, even when there are none. I let my belief in ghosts cloud my judgment, instead of looking at the facts rationally. I'll still watch scary movies for fun, but next time something strange happens, I'll try to remain level-headed and look for mundane explanations first before jumping to the paranormal. While ultimately embarrassing, I'm grateful this happened. It made me confront my own tendency to irrationality in the face of the unknown. The human imagination really is something to be marveled at, for better or worse.